Thank you, and welcome to the Patriots 300 Level Podcast. My name is Eric, and I'm joined by my co-host, Kevin. Welcome back for our 13th episode this week, where we'll be breaking down last Thursday's game versus the Falcons, discussing news around the NFL, and previewing this upcoming Sunday's game versus the Tennessee Titans. As a reminder, you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Pats 300 Level Pod for up-to-the-minute updates and commentary and news of the day. So, Kevin, just to start, what was your thoughts of last week's game versus the Falcons? What was your biggest takeaway?
I think one of my biggest takeaways is that Thursday night football is never good. So it creates a lot of sloppiness, and we saw it with the Patriots and even the Falcons too, where you're getting penalties which aren't usually happening this late in the season, and it's just no way that they can physically recover in that amount of time. So that was one of them, and then number two, it was another good victory by the Patriots. Wasn't something that was dominating for the offense, but you really don't expect that. And we talked about that last week, where you shouldn't be expecting large offensive games in these Thursday night games. You basically just want to get out of there with a victory, and it doesn't really matter how you win. So you can't really kind of look at it too much way the one if they were sloppy, just because of that lack of time. And I think we saw them a pretty good run game and a really good defensive attack against the Falcons. So it was nice to see just another game of that defense stepping up. How about you?
Yeah, no, I think that it reminded me a lot of early 2000s Patriot football, where defense was dominant. Running attack was what was going to carry, and offensive line was carrying the offense. And then you had a good quarterback being a game manager-esque, where he wasn't going to turn the ball over. I thought he did have the one interception, but I thought Mac played excellent outside of two different throws. He was very efficient. And I think it's just a game you can build on just because it wasn't as dominant as you might have thought going into the game. Falcons didn't look that good. Patriots were coming off a huge win, but it was a Thursday night game where they did end up winning 25-0. So I thought it's a Thursday night game. You got the win, which is the biggest part, but it was dominant, especially from the defensive side of the ball. And it's just hopefully something they build upon and they bring into this upcoming game versus number one Tennessee.
And talking about that defense, it was another big game for them. What do you think are kind of the reasons behind that? Was it just the offenses that they've been facing recently? Is this defense legit? Has anything changed? And kind of how do you see them versus kind of their other defenses of the past?
No, that's a good question. Something I was thinking of. I think part of it has to do with they haven't really gone up against a good offense or a great offense the past maybe 4 or 5 weeks, but they have gone up against some good offenses. It's not like 2019 where they started off on a historic 8-game winning streak where they were just absolutely dominating, but they weren't going up against a quarterback that any other year would even be a starter, let alone that year. I think that they did go up against a good Chargers offense. They went up against a good Browns offense, even though the Browns were without Chubb. So it's showing that they are good. Going into the year, I thought that they were going to have the number one offense or number one defense, or at worst number 3. And I think it's just the first 6-7 weeks were a little shaky in some games, but I think it's part of that might have been a lot of new additions to this defense and trying to figure out where each person plays, along with the extension of the preseason. We're seeing some players that weren't really as productive the first 6-7 weeks starting to really shine. Kyle Van Noy was one of the key points this game, where he had 2 sacks, an interception, return for a touchdown, whereas the first 6-7 weeks he wasn't really showing as much. Godchow has really stepped up recently. Even some smaller contributors like Carl Davis has been playing excellent lately. So I think you're getting your best effort out of not only your key players like Matthew Judon, Christian Barmore, and JC Jackson, but a lot of your role players and other starters are really playing up to their potential right now. And I think that's what's contributing to it. So I think it's a little bit of, they haven't really faced any great offenses the past 5-6 weeks, like Chiefs historically, or say Tampa Bay or the Cowboys, but they were going up against some good defenses. And I think the pass rush is starting to get better and better. You're getting production. I mentioned this a little bit, but you're getting production outside of just Judon and Barmore. And since the quarterbacks are being pressured a lot, they have to make the decision quicker. and that's leading to either interceptions or just incompletions and ending the drive. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think again, like you said, it was another big game for them. Is it the fact that the offenses they're facing are not that strong, or is it legit? I don't think I kind of agree with you. It's not like that defense for 2019 where they're facing subpar quarterbacks. They're facing some pretty good above average quarterbacks. Herbert, Baker Mayfield, even though you don't really believe he is, but it's not like they're
Even
doing
Matt
this.
Ryan's a former MVP.
Yeah, even Matt Ryan, he doesn't have anyone to throw to. You could tell how frustrated he was with that team, and he really has to get. It's kind of a conversation a little bit later on, but he really needs to probably get out of there and try and find a new team to latch on to for the end of his career. This that way he could do something, because that team isn't doing anything in the next few years. So,
Yep.
But I think it's I would say this in kind of two factors. I would say one, it's probably too early to tell where this team is at, just because they haven't been tested by an elite quarterback since the Cowboys game. And I think we both kind of recognize the Cowboys game is really the turning point, and that's where, for all intents and purposes, Belichick reportedly has taken over a lot more of this defense, and maybe not the down to town like play calls, but his footprints on it a lot more. You could even tell by watching him on the sidelines, he's much more involved than before. Yes, he usually goes and talks to the defense. He usually write some stuff down, but he's got sheets and sheets of paper. He's breaking down the plays from the past series. Every single drive, he's not really paying attention as much to the offense. So it definitely looks like he's more involved, and I think that's where a lot of this stemmed from. But it's also going to be interesting to see how it changes over the next few weeks. Even though the next few quarterbacks aren't elite, I'd say Allen's probably the best one you're facing, and we both have our doubts with him, and we've really seen that this year. But I think one of the biggest reasons too, other than Belichick changing, was their change of scheme of going to zone, and they're about 70% zone, where they're usually about 70% man. So I think are they doing so well because teams aren't ready for it, and it's something that they're not used to game plan for? All offseason they're expecting man. The beginning of the season they're playing man. So are they going to be are they game planning enough for zone? And are the quarterbacks that they're facing, the upcoming ones, will they be strong enough where if you're not playing a great zone, you can attack a zone really easily. But the big difference with the Patriots this year is the pass rush. So if you have an effective pass rush, you can play zone because they won't have time to sit back and kind of pick apart the zone. And I think that's where we've seen what you mentioned, Barmore and Judon. And also we've seen a lot more other role players kind of take off the last few weeks because of some changes across the line. Because Carl Davis has been playing on the nose a lot more. Godchau's played a lot better the last two games. He's not big enough, I don't think, to really be a tackle, a nose tackle, a defensive tackle. But on the end, he's been actually playing really effective. And then same thing goes as Dietrich Wise. I know it sounds like I hate him, and I kind of go off on him all the time. It's not his fault. Like I've said, he's been playing out of position. He's not a regular end on a 3-4 defense. Is more on a 4-3 defensive end. But he's been playing more in a sub package role and like a nickel, and not in the run defense of schemes. And they're using more Carl Davis, they're using Guy, and then they're using either Godchau or Barmore in that rotation for the run based defense. So between Wise stepping up, Kyle Van Noy playing a lot better, which it looks like he was fighting something at the beginning of the year. He's playing a lot faster and quicker. And same thing with Hightower. So it seems like a lot of these players are healthier, and then they're also, I think, playing faster just because they're more confident. So when you're not knowing where you're supposed to be, you're slower because you're kind of reacting and you're not playing and just watching it. So I think it's tough to tell. I think it's going to be up there. The tough test is going to be when you go face a really elite quarterback, and that may not be. And we were talking about this until the playoffs and facing Mahomes, because other than Mahomes is not really an elite quarterback in the AFC. Besides Mac Jones. Anyway, going on to that.
I think just quickly, I think it's too early to say that this defense is as good or better than some of the previous defenses with the Patriots, where 2001, 2003, 2004, even 2014, those defenses carried you the entire season. 14, not as much, but I'd still put that defense up there with the early 2001s. But I still think, for instance, the 2004 team, in my opinion, is the best Patriots team that they had maybe ever. And it was largely due to how good that defense really was. So I don't think you can say it right now. Maybe at the end of the season, if they keep going on this run and then in the playoffs, they shut down Mahomes. And then if they win the Super Bowl and shut down, say, Tom Brady or the Rams offense or something like that, maybe we could have that conversation. I know statistically, it's each week as they keep improving, it's going to be might be in that conversation. But I think right now it's just too early.
And I think the other thing that we need to remember too is, even though the game's a lot different than it was 10 years ago, the Patriots did make the Super Bowl with a really poor defense in 2011. That was actually probably just the worst team that they've ever had make the Super Bowl. It was not a good, not a good team. It's probably one of Belichick's best coaching.
I still put 2006 then 13 ahead of that, but I agree.
By how poor that roster was and how poor that defense was, it's an amazing feat to get there. But also that was also 10 years ago, where the league was a lot different, and that was I think the last year they played zone defense and went to man afterwards. I could be wrong with the year.
I think they went on that part. I think they went to man 2013 when they got Talib. Yeah, and Talib allowed them to.
Yeah, so I think that was when they first started doing it, and it's because you really have to in this league, the way that the receivers are lately, and how fast and how strong they are. But we could be seeing a change, because things change every 10 years or so, and we're seeing a big switch to defense lately, where a lot of these high-powered offenses aren't really scoring as much. They're really being kind of taken down by a lot of these defenses. So who knows? Maybe zone might be the next thing, as long as you get the pass rush. Onto the offensive line, the rushing attack. I think Stevenson again is showing that he's a really good back. He's strong, he's quick, he's big, he's powerful, and just the combination between him and Harris is going to be really good for the rest of the stretch of this year, and then even next year. It's a shame that I think Harris is going to his fourth year next year, if I'm right. So that could be his last year with the team, which could be sad. But again, you don't pay running backs. But what do you think of this offensive line, how it's been performing, and then just kind of the running attack?
Like we've said the past couple of weeks, where the first 5-6 weeks, the offensive line was by far the weak point on this team. The last 6 weeks or so, it's been, ever since the Houston game, has been one of the stronger points. And then when Trent Brown came back, I know we were wondering, is he going to take over for Isaiah Wynn, or are you going to move Awenu back to guard and take out Karras? But taking out your best offensive lineman, and they still haven't missed a beat. I saw something where there was one formation last week, or I'm sure it happened numerous times, but where you had Trent Brown, a 380-pound right tackle, then you had Michael Awenu, a 350-pound tight end to the right of Trent Brown, then you had a 250-pound fullback, and then you had a 240-pound running back in Stevenson. How are defenses going to stop that size? And they have not only is the offensive line the biggest offensive line in football, like size-wise, they're also one of the faster ones where they have speed. They're able to get out in open space. So I think they've been doing great. And we said that offensive line was going to be one of their strong points going into the season, and now we're really starting to see that. Something that David Andrews said pregame to the team was, we're playing smash mouth football, where they don't want to, or tough guy football, where it's going to be tough for opposing teams unless you're more physical to be able to beat that offensive line. And a lot of teams aren't used to that physicality. So I think if they just keep going, they set the pace, and then having two really good running backs behind them, and Harris and Stevenson, allows them the offense to move the ball and get going.
Yeah, I think this is really the team that we were expecting. at the
Yeah.
beginning of the year. We were expecting a really good offensive line, a really good running game, and we're expecting a really good defense to kind of lead this team. And that way, Mac didn't have to do everything. And we're seeing that over the last few weeks. And I think that's going to really help this team kind of go forward. And it kind of goes against the grain of how defenses are right now, where they're built to be faster and quicker and speedier. And now this is that hard-nosed style where it's kind of complete opposite of the way the league's going. So this may be just another way that they may be able to kind of take advantage of how teams have gone later and smaller. For that. So it should be really fun to just watch. And again, I'm still always impressed by Stevenson. Just looks like he's ready to burst out a 30-yard run pretty much every time he touches the ball. And I'm just really impressed by him.
One quick point on just the running game I just wanted to get in, or two quick points. One was just another game where not only were they able to get him on a lot of yards, but it was yards after contact. I know last week Stevenson, I believe, had 65 of his 100 yards were after contact. This week, the running game as a whole, Stevenson and Harris, 76 of their 134 yards, so almost 60% again were after contact. So it's just that physical style of football. And then another point that really helped, I think, set the pace this week was Jakob Johnson having by far the best game of his career, setting the pace, just very effective blocking. And he's been getting better and better each week. I know we weren't even sure if he was going to stay on the team after the first week or so when they signed the fullback that was drafted by the Ravens. We thought he might be able to take a spot, but he's really emerged, especially the last 3 or 4 weeks, where he's looking more and more like James Devlin, who is arguably the best blocking fullback in the NFL the last 30 years. He's looking more and more like that style of player. And I think that's helping set the pace for the offense as well.
Yeah. Now kind of going on to the Falcons, we don't have to spend too much time on this, but Matt Ryan, their offensive line, Dean Pease, what were really thoughts of them and how they handled this game and what was their kind of undoing?
Yeah, I think just going into the game, I wasn't sure how the Patriots could lose this game unless Mac Jones had turnovers, just because the Falcons were missing some of their best players. They were missing Calvin Ridley, arguably one of the top 10 wide receivers in the NFL. And they were also missing Cordarrelle Patterson, who's been one of the more surprising dominant players in the NFL this year. With only having Kyle Pitts, I wasn't sure how they were going to be able to score the ball. And then they weren't. So their offensive line was pretty horrendous. I know they allowed the most sacks in the NFL going into this game. And Matt Ryan was pressured, I believe, 58% of his dropbacks, which is insane. Part of that is just showing how good the Patriots defensive line, front 4, front 7 has been going into this week. But also part of it was just that's also how bad that Falcons offensive line is. But I think Matt Ryan just didn't have anyone to really throw the ball to because they covered Pitts very well. And outside of Pitts, there isn't really anyone on that offense. But B, I think they were just he was getting a little flustered too, just because he was getting pressured so much. Just going on Dean Pease, I thought that he had a pretty good game plan. I know Mac Jones only got pressured 4 times, which if you look at the stats, you'd be a little surprised about that, because he got sacked 3 times, but it was just very well designed, well-timed blitzes on 3rd down, where it was designed very well, where there was a hole based on blocking scheme where they weren't able to pick everyone up. So there were, I believe, 2 or 3 third downs where they stopped the Patriots and forced them into either a field goal or a punt that otherwise could have ended up going for a touchdown. Instead of it being 25-0, could have been 38 or even more. So I thought Dean Pease, I know his defense gave up 16 points or 18 points, but it could have been a lot worse. And I thought he actually had a pretty good game plan against the Patriots.
Yeah, I think kind of talking on that Dean Pease part, I think he had some really kind of nice things. One thing is that he does know the Patriots real well because he was a defensive coordinator there. So he kind of knows how the offense likes to operate and kind of some of the weaknesses of it. But there were some things that he had which were kind of different than what we've seen so far. Of those sacks, I think most of them or all of them were from the second level where it was a corner or safety kind of blitzing. And that's something that,
and it was a delayed blitz too.
Yeah. So I think that's something that they have to just work on practice. I'm sure they will, because that Mike Vrabel is watching that and kind of seeing, oh, this might be a way I can attack him. But I'm not too concerned there. It was just kind of something that was a lot different than what we've seen so far. And like how Mac is, the second he sees something, he's pretty quick to learn how to adjust. So I'm not too concerned, but that was something that was a little bit different in this game. Matt Ryan, again, he couldn't do anything in the game. It wasn't his fault. I'm not putting really any blame on him. He had no offensive line. I think you said they're ranked the worst in the league. And if they weren't, they'd look the worst.
Yeah, they at least allowed the most sacks going into that game.
Yeah, they did not look well. And he didn't have any weapons to throw to, and he was getting killed the whole time.
Yeah.
For a pocket passer, anything over 30% is you're getting pressured a decent amount. Anything over 35% is you're going to have a really bad day. It's going to be really tough. It's going to be pretty hard to win the game if you're getting pressured 35% or more. If you're getting pressured 58% of the time, that's just unheard of. I've never even I don't track pressures that much, but I probably should be doing it more, but 58% sounds just insane. So
I remember earlier I believe the Bucks game where it was either Bucks or one of the games where Mac Jones was pressured 40% of the time, and we thought that was insane.
Yeah.
And that's nothing compared to
58
what Matt Ryan
is just nuts. So you could see he had no shot not to win this game. So on that. So going on to Mac, we talk about him every week. What do you think of him this week? I know it wasn't really his best game, wasn't really his worst. It was kind of but that's really how Thursday Night Football is. So I'll kind of preface it with that.
I thought he was very good. He was really efficient, dialed in. I think if you actually go back and look at the game, I think he only had 2 bad throws. Granted, both of them cost them points. One was third down to Jacoby Myers, where Jacoby Myers was open, but he threw it too far towards the sideline, where if he threw it on point, Myers would have gotten a first down and more. And then there was an interception where N'Keal Harry was wide open underneath, but he forced it into Jonnu Smith and that ended up being an interception, where both of those wiped out points that they could have otherwise had. But I thought he had a very good game outside of that. He had 85% completion percentage, 22 of 26. Second straight game of having completion percentage over 82%, which is insane just for a normal quarterback, let alone a rookie. So I thought he was really good. There were obviously a couple throws he wish he could have back, but he's a rookie. He's learning, and as he keeps going, I think he's going to keep getting better. He was going up against a good defensive mind. Going up against Vrabel this upcoming week should be another task, but I thought he was good.
Yeah, I think kind of one of the things that Belichick kind of summed up, and it really held through when you kind of rewatch this game, that a lot of the drives that stalled out were mainly due to penalties or errors by the Patriots, where if those didn't happen, they would have actually probably scored another 14, maybe 21 points off of that. It would have been a really big blowout. So even though I said it was a meh game, it wasn't like a flash game. It wasn't something where it's the Browns where he's throwing 300 yards and he's throwing 4 touchdowns or whatever it was. So, but yeah, he had a really solid, really kind of refined game. It wasn't bad in the game. I would say probably B+, A-. It wasn't anything.
Yeah.
The interception was forced. Like you said, he had Harry, but again, I don't know, even if he even looked like he had Harry, they still might have been able to undercut the route based on how far it was down the field. I also put part of the blame, not all of it, on Jonnu Smith on that, just because it was difficult for him to try and break up that pass, but he could have done more to kind of fight for it. So it's just something we've seen by him. And someone had mentioned that a good comparison for him is he's the Brandon Cooks of tight ends. And actually, I think that's one of the best comparisons.
I don't agree with that at all, but
the way he's played so far, he's very flash. He looks the part. He has the intangibles for it, but he does not look right when he's out there. Like Brandon Cooks wasn't an excellent route runner. He's basically kind of a go runner. And he's quick, he's fast, but he's not very quick movement. Like he doesn't move quick. He doesn't have good agile movements, good route running, really. And that's kind of the same thing too with Smith. He looks the part. He's big, he's fast, he's tall. And it just watching him out there, he doesn't look comfortable. And I think it's just him thinking too much. So that comparison may likely change next year. But just the way he looks right now is he just doesn't look right. He's all in his head. After that Saints game, he hasn't been right since. And there's been some moments where it looks like he's going to start taking off, but then he does something else where he gives up 2 run stuffs in the blocking game. So
I think it's just too early to say that. I think a lot of it just has to do with a completely different system that he's not used to. And even Josh McDaniel said that this is more of a foundational year for him. They have him under contract for 4 years. So I think the next 3 years, he's really going to start stepping up. I think it's a little telling where they signed Hunter Henry for 3 years. They signed Jonnu Smith for 4, both at the same money. I think because they were expecting Hunter Henry to come in this year and kind of step up right away. And I think they were kind of expecting this a little bit from Jonnu, just because of a completely different system that he's just not used to. But we'll see. It could be a good comparison, but I think it's just way too early for that.
I think that comparison's more for how he's playing now, not versus the player overall. So I think that's really how I'm agreeing with it. So that may likely change next year when he has more time in the system. But right now, he looks lost, basically. Kind of going on to that, our 3 up, 3 down.
I'll have you start.
Okay. So 3 up, I couldn't fully give it just 3. So I'll pull an Eric on here. So I've got Matthew Judon, Christian Barmore, Kyle Van Noy, and Duggar. So with Matthew Judon, he had another excellent game. This game, he started off a little slow, but then by the end of the game, if you kind of look back on how many plays he had, he was just terrific in this game. It's just insane just to watch him, and even being held a lot. And the same goes for Barmore. They make a ton of plays even when being held back. So it's just the 2 of them are what are really kind of driving this defense and really allowing them to play zone. Again, Christian Barmore, pretty same thing. I can't really add too much to that. Kyle Van Noy had his best game of the season. And it's funny that he ended up getting drug tested after the game because he had he thinks because he had such a good game. But he looks like he's playing a lot faster. He's not playing. He's also in the same sort of route as that Wise playing time situation where he's not always on the field for base right now. So it could be too, it's helping him that he's quicker and more refreshed by coming out for sub packages. So he's not being asked to do as much now. So that was another one. I think he played just really well. He was really good in this game. And then Kyle Duggar, he continues to really show how much he's improved from even the beginning of the year where the beginning of the year, he was actually kind of a liability in the pass game. He's just looking a lot quicker now. And he's looking like either he's been able to understand more or he's just more comfortable with the pass coverage. He basically shut down Pitts by himself most of the time. He was one-on-one with him. He played really well against them. He had some really good hits. And there was one of them that was like wicked loud on it. So
it was on the kickoff.
But he's just playing really well. And I think one of the comparisons before for him was Jamal Adams with the Seahawks, where he may not even have to be a good coverage safety. He may be that run stuffing, blitzing safety. But the way he's looking now is with the pass coverage the last few weeks, and just his reaction time, it looks like he's not overthinking anymore. He's kind of reacting rather than thinking. He could be even better than that. So I think the ceiling for him, he hasn't reached that yet based on how good that coverage has been.
Yeah, so I have very similar ones, and I had a feeling that was going to be the case, and I'm going to have a little more than 3, so I wanted you to describe most of them first, so I'd have enough time. So I want to be rambling on. I think number 1 is just Kyle Van Noy. Not too much to add other than, like you said, best game of the season by far for him. Last 3 weeks, he's actually been the number 1 rated linebacker by Pro Football Focus in the entire NFL. I know analytics and PFF's rankings isn't perfect, just because Matthew Judon isn't even one of the Patriots' top 8 players based on PFF. But I think it's just a good analogy, just showing that he's starting to get better and starting to be the player we thought he was going to be. 3 pressures, 2 sacks, 8 tackles, interception, and a touchdown. Number 2, have to go with Jakob Johnson. Like I was mentioning earlier, he really set the tone in the running game, had by far the best game of the season for him. And he looked a lot like James Devlin, who was one of my favorite Patriot players of all time, just really stepping up, going into the gap, and then hitting the first defender and allowing the running backs to get more yards. Number 3, Kyle Duggar, like you said, 6 tackles, shut down Kyle Pitts, was all over the field. It seemed like he was making a play on every other, or making tackle or stop on every other play. And then just like you said, his coverage has been getting a lot better. Just a stat to throw out: last year, passer rating against him was 93.4. This year it's 60.0 when quarterbacks are targeting whoever he's covering. So he's really stepped up in the coverage. And it's not surprising that last year he wasn't great. He was coming from a Division II school where he's not used to going up against as fast offenses and as complex offenses, but the more he plays, the better he's getting. And then just him mixed with Christian Barmore and the draft class of the last couple of years, they really have some key pieces to build around going forward. Number 4, I have to go with Godchow. He was making plays all pretty much stepping up in the front 7 all game. I thought he's had a couple of good games lately, but this was more of his breakout game, in my opinion, where he had 4 pressures, 1 sack, 3 QB hits, a hurry, had some good tackles in the running game. He really had pretty much a coming out party. And then just some honorable mentions: Matthew Judon was his usual self, 5 pressures, a sack, 3 QB hits. He actually, on one of the Matt Ryan interceptions, I believe it was the McCourty interception, he actually dropped back into coverage and was covering the person that I think Matt Ryan was going to throw the ball to, because he didn't think that there was going to be coverage there, but it was Judon covering there. And then there was pressure that forced Ryan to throw it elsewhere, which allowed McCourty to get the interception. So just a play that's not going to show up in your stat sheet, but he's doing more than just rush the passer compared to other pass rushers in the NFL. And then Christian Barmore was also really good. Just another honorable mention: 3 pressures, 1 hit, 2 hurries, 1 holding penalty against, or offensive line had a holding penalty against Barmore. And a stat I saw today is through the first 11 weeks of the season, Christian Barmore has faced the most double teams out of any defensive lineman in the NFL this year. And he's still being so impactful. He has the second most QB pressures through 11 weeks out of any rookie defensive lineman since 2006. So he's just been insane this year. And him with Judon has been carrying this defense. 3 down. I'll let you go first.
All right. 3 down was really pretty tough on trying to figure this out. So some of it's nitpicky, some of it's not. I'd say Jonnu Smith, number 1. Number 2, David Andrews, and number 3, Thursday Night Football. So number 1, Jonnu Smith, he had 2 run stuffs in the game. And he also had that interception, which I'd probably put maybe 5 to 10% on him. But I just want to see him look tougher out there. And he's starting to show some flashes, but he just isn't where you want him to be. David Andrews is mainly he had 2 big holding calls. And one of them was that 35-yard run by Stevenson, that really, where it didn't even need to be there. Stevenson was a beast.
It kind of opened up the hole though, but I think Stevenson would have hit it anyway. I think
would have got it anyway. So those is really kind of nitpicky there, but it was such a good game where it's kind of tough to say. And then if you want another player, I'd probably say maybe Shaq Mason, because he had a couple other holding calls. And I think he had it was either run stuffs or on the pass rush. I'm pretty sure it was a run stuff. I can't remember now. But I don't really want to put him on there. So Thursday Night Football is my last one, just because it's not a great product. I think if you're going to be having that, either have it on maybe Friday night, but you would get less ratings because it's a Friday night.
Yeah.
Or you have the bye week the week before for those teams. So that way they're rested enough, and then they get kind of a mini bye afterwards. So I would probably do something like that. It's just not, I don't think it's fair for the players to be playing that short rest. And you kind of see the sloppy play from it. So how about you?
I wanted to go with you first because I actually didn't have any. I thought about adding Johnny Smith. I know he had that one holding penalty, but that wasn't really even a holding penalty. I don't think they should have called that. So I don't put that against him. I know the interception, he was targeted, but it would have been a tough play for him to break it up. He could have had more of an effort, but it was such a tough play where I can't put anything bad against him. David Andrews, I know he had that holding penalty, but overall, I thought besides that, he had a good game. So there wasn't anyone I could think of to even put in there. Jake Bailey had probably his best game of the year, which he was sometimes someone you could throw in, but and then even his kickoffs were excellent this week. So
I think Gunner is maybe another one you could do from special teams, because I think he only had 14 yards in kick returns and punt returns out of all of them. But again, that's just kind of nitpicky and not something that really matters.
He had 17 yards, which was there were 3 punt returns. One was a 17-yard punt return, and then the other 2 netted 0.
Yeah.
So
they're kind of going across the league for the NFL, AFC. I think the 2 biggest games that we saw were the Bills getting smoked by the Colts, and then the Titans losing to the Texans, which has really kind of opened up both the division and possibly the number 1 seed. Number 1 seed really everything kind of has to go right for the Patriots. So I don't think we need to really be talking too much there. But just about the Bills, what are your kind of thoughts about how they looked, and just maybe a quick blurb on the Titans, but we'll kind of get to them later on.
Yeah, I didn't get a chance to watch either the Bills or the Titans game. I was driving at the time, so I kept getting messages to my phone through my Apple Play, so I'd be able to hear what the messages were, but I couldn't actually watch it. So I can't really give too much of comment of how each looked. Okay. From what I heard about the Bills, the offensive line has kind of been in shambles the last few weeks. They've been missing some key players, which might have something to do with it. But then they also couldn't stop the run, which I think that's part of the reason why I think Carson Wentz only threw for 106 yards, but then the Colts were able to score 45 points because the Bills had, I think, 3 turnovers, and the Colts running back ran for almost 200 or over 200 yards and 5 touchdowns. So the Patriots have a good running attack. And they have, so I think that could be what they try and target against the Bills going forward, but we'll have to see. I can't really comment too much on that. I think just Titans, like we said, ever since they lost Derrick Henry, I don't think they're going to be able to really beat any good teams. I know they beat the Rams, but Rams had some turnovers that allowed the Titans to score. I don't see how the Titans offense without Julio Jones, Derrick Henry can really do too much. Chiefs, that's the one team that scares me, and it looked like they beat a good Cowboys team 19-9. They weren't able to score a ton, but they held a very good Cowboys offense to only 9 points. So looks like they're starting to hit their stride, which is something worrisome for the Patriots. I think that if the Patriots win this upcoming Sunday and the Browns beat the Ravens, the Patriots are the 1 seed in the AFC heading into their last 5 games of the season, and would hold a tiebreaker win over Titans. And then depending on different tiebreakers, they might hold a tiebreaker versus Ravens or Chiefs, depending on how the rest of the season plays out. But it is in play for them if they win out, or if they go 5-1 over their last 6, they have a shot. So we'll have to see. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think kind of the Bills, like you were talking about, they get ran online. I think we're kind of seeing a game plan kind of sort out for how you can kind of really attack them, where again, like I said, a lot of the teams have started going smaller and quicker. And that may be kind of the hindrance for the Bills. Number one, they've been getting run on a lot lately. So I think kind of that power run game is going to really help the Patriots against them. And the other thing is Josh Allen, where he's coming back to earth a little bit, not as much as he was 2 years ago, but he's still has those moments where we've talked about before. We both don't think he's a great quarterback. We think he's probably average. He has the physical skills for it. I don't
Yeah.
think he's got the mental skills to do it. And who knows, maybe that might change. Maybe it's something he'll learn over time. But we see these mistakes that he makes. We even saw it last year in the playoffs where he got into a big game. They started having crowds back. And we just saw how he ended up kind of collapsing there. So it's not totally surprising with it. And hopefully that kind of leaves the door open for the Patriots. Like you said, just based on the things that need to happen where it's kind of their own control. Is it realistic to expect them to win out? Probably not, but I wouldn't be surprised either way. I would expect them over these next 4 games. I would say to at least finish 2-2, preferably 3-1. It would be fantastic if they were 4-0, but I would say at least 2-2. 3-1 definitely would be what I'm thinking they're hopefully gonna get, but we'll see.
Yeah, my thought is they go 3-1, where it depends on which Bills team shows up. I think going on the road versus the Bills is still going to be a tough challenge. We'll see. I think they have the team where they could beat them. I think they could go 4-0. The one reason why I'm thinking they probably go 3-1 is they're on such a big winning streak. I don't know if they finished the year on such a big winning streak, but if you actually look back to 2003 team, they started the season 2-2 with only Brady on his 3rd year as a starting quarterback, and they won out. Where they started 2-2, they finished the season, including the playoffs, 17-2.
Yeah,
so it is possible. I think it's just more unlikely.
Yeah, no, agreed. And then kind of looking to the Titans, I think it's kind of really a shame for them just by how many injuries they've been having on offense. And we both knew Julio Jones would be injured, and that's why we didn't really want the Patriots to go after him. But then Brown getting hurt. Derrick Henry is the biggest one where Tannehill is really effective with the play action. But you have to be able to run in order to actually do the play action. So by them not having a good running game right now, it's really hurting him. He's kind of really showing his true colors where he's not a great quarterback. He's probably an average at best. Kind of like I would say it's probably similar to Jared Goff would be kind of my comparison. Maybe a little worse than Jimmy Garoppolo. But I think he needs a lot to surround him in order to be effective. So, I think you're kind of seeing that now. And then, like you said, the Chiefs, they somewhat turning around. Their offense still hasn't looked great. And I think also the Cowboys, Mike McCarthy had a couple bad kind of clock management where you're not going for it on 4th down at your 45 when there's 7 minutes left in the game and you're down by 2 scores. I don't think that made any sense whatsoever. And then even when you have the ball back and you're down by 10 points, and you're marching down the field, you're on the 25-yard line with, I think it was 2 minutes left or 2:30 or maybe a minute 50. And I was saying right then, go for the field goal right now. And then that way you don't have to worry about it. And then they threw in the interception. So right after I said it, they threw the interception. So it didn't matter. But at least if you get the field goal, then you have that out of the way. Then you can kind of do like a Hail Mary if you recover the onside. So, I don't think they still look great there. I think it'll be really kind of interesting to see how they play going down the stretch. But the defense looks a lot more improved. So I think that's the biggest thing from them. Now discussing the Titans really quick here. Like we said, they're missing Derrick Henry, Julio Jones, Bud Dupree, AJ Brown is hurt and out of practice on Wednesday. He may not play Sunday. I think they have 15 players. I think it was 15, and you can kind of correct me if I'm wrong. It's either 10 or 15 players that didn't practice on Wednesday.
It was either 10 or 15.
Insane. And they've just been hit by the injury bug, and it's just. I like Mike Vrabel a lot. I think he's a really good defensive genius. I think he's really good at getting his players riled up. And I think he knows the Patriots really well. And we've seen that with a lot of former Patriot players / coordinators. But I think even that Vrabel magic, I don't think can really work here. They're too depleted to kind of go up against the Patriots. And it's not like the Patriots have a fantastic super team, but like roster set, but just by how many injuries they have and how pivotal Derrick Henry is to the team, especially if AJ Brown's out, you really don't have much on offense at that point. And like I said about Tannehill, their defense is pretty good. I don't think it's elite or anything like that, but I would say it's better than last year how they played, and it's a little bit better than average. So, if you want to give any kind of other feedback, then we can kind of go into what the spread is and what you're predicting.
Yep. Yeah, I think just going into this is I haven't been big on the Titans even dating back to 2019. I think they're more of a one-trick pony where it's just Derrick Henry, and if you can stop Derrick Henry, I can't see them beating anyone. It's just most teams haven't been able to figure out how to stop Derrick Henry. Even when the Patriots lost to the Titans in the playoffs in 2019, Derrick Henry didn't have a big game. Tannehill didn't have a big game. It's just they lost essentially 14-13. There's that last intercept pick six, but essentially it was 14-13.
If Edelman caught that ball, they would have probably ended up driving and winning the game.
Yep, I agree. So they don't have much being without Derrick Henry, being without Julio Jones, Bud Dupree, and even possibly AJ Brown. I have no idea how. Only way I can see the Titans winning is if essentially Mac Jones pulls Matthew Stafford when the Stafford played the Titans a few weeks ago and just had some horrendous turnovers. That's the only way I can really see that happening. Vrabel, I think he's a great coach. I think he's shown that over the past few years, and he definitely knows the Patriots, but I don't think he can overcome what they're missing right now. Just looking, I wanted to look a little bit at their defense to see they're 8-3 right now. Is their defense carrying them, especially since they've only lost one game since Derrick Henry's been hurt, and it's really not that great. It's average, like you said, definitely better than it was last year, but pass rush, they're 20th in pass rush, ninth in sacks, which is one of the best ones. But coverage, they're 9th worst in passing yards allowed. And then run defense, they have a pretty good run defense, fourth best in yards per carry, only 97 a game, which the Patriots' strength so far the last 4 or 5 wins has been their running attack, but 19th best scoring defense. Their defense is average, but it's not elite. So I don't think their defense is going to be something that I don't think they're going to be able to hold the Patriots to say a 10-9 game or something like that. So it should be interesting, but I think the Patriots win pretty soundly.
Yeah. I think kind of really the one thing I'd be worried about in this game too would be knowing that Vrabel knows the Patriots really well. Is he able to kind of concoct something on a scheme base that would really stop them and really confuse Jones? And I know we talked about this before, where after Jones sees something, he's really good about learning and correcting and going against it. So that second level blitz, I'm not too concerned about. But is there something else that he hasn't seen that he could throw at them that could maybe kind of stifle them a little bit? Yeah. I think kind of the key to the game too is that the Patriots kind of really need to go out on front and get some points, because I think the way that the Titans want to play this is a low scoring kind of dogfight game where they're trying to be out physical you and kind of get it down to the end, and kind of how the Patriots game plan was against the Bucs, where we want it to be a 1-score game at the end and whoever has the ball last basically wins. And I don't think that would be an effective way to play this. If I had the Patriots, I'd want to get out in front really fast and play from ahead. And that way you don't have to kind of worry about that. So right now the line has jumped up a ton. It was, I think, -2 to start. It's now up to -6.5. Over under set at 44.5. I'd be taking the Patriots on the points here. But I could also see a scenario where it doesn't happen. So I would be projecting right now, I would say 31-10. But I could also see it where it's like 17-13, or it's like 14-11 or something stupid like that. So I wouldn't be shocked either way. I just think everything the Titans are up against with all of their injuries and the way that the Patriots know Tannehill, I think they're going to exploit him, have a couple turnovers. And I think 31-10 would not be the over. I definitely wouldn't be hammering the over on this point just because the Titans can't score enough. And I don't know if the Patriots would put up like 50 on them. So I would not go with the over here.
Yeah, I'm going very close to you,
Mhm.
27-10. And I think Titans might score first or second drive. And then after that, they're pretty much shut down. Similar to what we've
Mhm.
seen some of the past few weeks where
Yeah.
Chargers scored first drive, Browns scored first drive, and they didn't really do much the rest of the game.
Mhm.
I could see it, Patriots winning by even more than that. I don't see them getting blown out. I think that it could be a closer game, like 17-13, something like that. Maybe a pick six where
Mhm.
Titans are able to score, but I don't see, unless the Patriots shoot themselves, I don't see them losing this game. And they're going up against the number one seed. I know that Titans are definitely banged up right now, but it is a big game because they could possibly, this could be the deciding factor of the one seed going into the playoffs, since you would hold the tiebreaker versus the Titans.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's going to be a pretty good game. I'll be there, so it'll be
Yeah.
pretty fun to see. I'm really shocked they didn't flex this game.
Yeah, me too.
Um, I
I think part of that is the Bills the following week is a night game,
Mhm.
and then I think they knew they were going to flex the Patriots Colts, and then they might flex the following Patriots Bills
Mhm.
game. So I don't know if they wanted to have Patriots prime time 4 straight games.
The
That's my guess,
other
but
one of the things that Bertrand was saying the other day was that they were hesitant to flex any game this weekend just because of the complexity with Thanksgiving,
yeah,
where the crews would be having to move around, and it was a lot easier just not flex a game out. So
that's
since they
true.
had more prep time before, so that also makes sense. But on that note, thank you everyone for listening. Hope you had a nice Thanksgiving because this is coming out. We're taping this before Thanksgiving, but it won't be released until afterwards. So hope everyone had a nice holiday. Had some turkey, start getting up the Christmas decorations. And again, follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Pat's 300 Level Pod. And then subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. We're up on there if you're not watching there. So you could find us on different platforms, engage with us. Eventually, we will have our blog up. It's probably going to be more closer to the off season, but once we have something up, we'll let you know. But other than that, see you guys next week.